Hi everyone, so it's great to be here today with you. My name's Anoushka and I am the Director and Head Psychologist of AB Psych Counselling Services Singapore. And I guess I wanted to start today with a quote actually that I feel is particularly relevant. I don't know if you can see it. It's by the Dalai Lama, and basically the quote is, "Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive." And you may be wondering why this is relevant to my talk today, but hopefully by the end of it, that'll be clear. So having grown up in Singapore myself, largely immersed in the melting pot of cultures that exists here, it's been really interesting to return in the last year to see how much things have progressed, but also to reflect on where, as a TCK, myself now turned adult, where I fit in this changing landscape. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience as a TCK because I think that very much has bearing on what I'm going to say today as a therapist about the connection between being a TCK and how that's made me feel about family and relationships and what we can learn in that dimension. So I myself am of South African and Malaysian Chinese descent, yet the term third culture kid wasn't something that I had heard of till I moved to the States for my first year of university. And for the first time in my life, experienced not only culture shock, but also was faced with the daunting task of having to answer lots of questions about where I was from, what my cultural identity was, questions which I didn't feel I always could address fully at the time. I also looked at how racially segregated the university community was when I went away. And I remember at the time being quite confused about this, particularly in the food hall, for example, where the Chinese kids were only sitting with the Chinese kids, or the Hispanic kids were only sitting with the Hispanic kids. That was really starkly different from, growing up again as a TCK in Singapore, immersed in an international culture where, there weren't these segregations. And so I found myself, sort of asking, where would I be sitting, especially on days where I didn't recognize anyone. I remember then feeling very different. And I couldn't really understand, again, this idea of, who was I and where I would fit with this picture. So coming home my first summer, some of this confusion, was then addressed when I actually had lunch with a friend I had grown up with in Singapore who was going through the same struggle. She was in the UK actually, but interestingly enough faced with this strange question again of, where are we from and how is it that we haven't seen these segregations necessarily racially until we moved away. And she was reading a book at the time called Third Culture Kids. So for the first time then I, became aware of this term. And some of, what she mentioned in that conversation really resonated. So without getting too much into my personal story, however, I think what's really important and what I would like viewers to take away from this talk fundamentally is how pivotal and illuminating that confronting experience was for me. Because I realized that at the time I had grown up to the greater extent not seeing culture, not seeing race, amongst a very mixed group of people from all over the world who had all shared this similar language. And it wasn't that we didn't recognize that we had come from different racial backgrounds, but more that it was really a non-issue. Like so many other elements, socioeconomic class, family structure, how many other countries they lived in before Singapore. These things just weren't relevant or considered defining elements of a person in conversations. Unlike when I moved away, where these things did seem much more relevant. So in short, this made me realize that one of the advantages of growing up as a TCK is an absence of certain filters when it comes to connecting with other people. A suspension of judgment, which is very crucial now to the work I do as a therapist. So if we're to understand this as having an ability to more authentically and presently connect with another human being, as essentially a member of the planet. I think TCKs being naturally attuned to this, or having this as their default setting, have a real responsibility to share and role model this spirit of inclusivity. Alongside this, and very much related to this month's topic, is the idea of home and where that exists, which all TCKs, I think, find themselves reflecting on at some point or the other, as there is often no clear-cut answer. If it's not a distinct cultural community or country, where is this place called home? And very much in line with this month's theme of family and relationships, I think for TCK, home may be readily defined not as a physical space per se, but where you find yourself feeling the most connected with you and the people around you. And with the world becoming more and more global, people often moving away from their relatives by birth, then into communities where this notion of family is again being redefined. Salvador Minuchin, one of my favorites, and the father of family therapy, is famous in the community for admitting late in his career that he felt he had been guilty of trying to get people to change, when really his later work was governed by helping people to love each other better. At the heart of my work as a therapist is really, again, this idea of how can we break through our boundaries up here and learn to love and understand ourselves better and love and connect with others around us better from here. And I think if we can take a leaf out of the TCK Book of Wisdom and view ourselves really as just citizens of the globe, with an inherent accountability for ourselves and each other and the planet, perhaps that means we'll be one step closer to reaching both personal and planetary well-being. Thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to getting to speak again. Thanks, Grace. Thanks, Salonia, for this opportunity. And I wish you all a very good day.